Frontline Gaming presents 40K Stat Center with your hosts, Val Heffelfinger and the Falcon.
The enemy of my enemy may be a wog. Would Eldar Flyers learn an inconvenient truth at the Allies of Convenience GT?
TJ and DJ met at the top table of Triple C, but who ended up taking the L?
And then we give thanks to those who spank tanks in the land of Manx at Warzone Man.
Bugmen and bots butt heads in battle at the Bristol City Open. Oh, hello, Peter. Episode 5 on tap. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing splendid, sir, and how are you?
I'm doing just fine. Feeling loose, feeling limber. We got a really nice show lined up and designed for all of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on various podcast platforms. Yeah, how about that new Goat Boy art? We're like a Big Boy 40K podcast now. We have a Goat Boy sanctioned art.
Just like everybody else, we had to do our part and pay Goat Boy so that he can live yet another week.
Yes, he's very much hand to mouth, just drawing podcast cover art. To just pay the bills and keep the lights on. And yes, in cartoon form, I in fact am that jacked.
Me too.
So some news from around the community a couple weeks back. I think it's a couple weeks ago now. We had Jim Vessel on, and he had tragically, I mean, as far as 40K goes, tragically lost his army, or it was stolen from him at Pearson International Airport. Turns out the thieves, as he was in departures, opened up the case thinking they were going to find some nice camera equipment or some computers or something. They found some minis, and they left it there. They abandoned it. Pearson Airport figured that out in about 10 days, and Jim Vessel got his stuff back.
That is incredible. Yeah, it's a really big deal for the community. Jim was definitely heartbroken, and the community really reached out. If you really want to, guys, if you check out the latest episode of Best in Faction podcast, about an hour in, Jim does a quick impromptu interview over the phone with them where he discusses how he felt about getting the army back, gives thanks to the community in general for everything that they did, and announces that the new army that he received from GW and from a couple local stores, he's going to be donating to charity. We're not sure when, we're not sure where, but I'm sure that'll all get leaked out as soon sometime soon, and when it does, we'll let you know.
I know he's fully planning to pay it forward. It was a really, really cool story, just how nice people were about trying to help him out. So an even happier happy ending. He gets his army back, and now he can do something nice for someone else, too.
Yeah, quite possibly the happiest of endings.
Well, you only get that at Pablo's Second Handy Shop.
Or one of those Thai massage places.
Neither of us own an NFL team. We can't just, we just can't do that. All right.
That's true.
I don't know how things are up in very northern Alberta on that front. Regardless, coming into a very, very large weekend in the 40K universe, we're going into List Scare Season Part 1. That's when the ATC team lists and games really get publicized. We have the American Team Championships coming at us really quickly this weekend. Are you excited?
Yes, I'm always excited for ATC. There's a lot of people that maybe don't get in as into it as say you or I do. But it's really, while the lists may not definitely reflect the meta in general from time to time because of the skew, you really get to see what the top minds are thinking in terms of what units are out there to play right now.
Yeah, and I personally haven't really gone too deep on a lot of the lists. I don't know if you have. I know they talked a little bit about it on Chapter Tactics, I guess 2 weeks ago now. But yeah, I describe it as list scare because it's the first big team event, and there are all these really lopsided skew lists because you're going for matchups and pairings in a team event. So usually various internet websites get all a flutter about the state of 40K, and really it's just the format and what that means and what that does for list design.
For sure. You're not really going to see too many 5 Repulsor Gullyman lists outside of a team event.
Or European tournaments. So, what about us? What about all those folks at home who don't get to go and be part of this massive, massive team event? Hundreds of players. There is an outfit coming that has been created. I alluded to this in the past few shows. I actually have their name now. They are Pro Tabletop. They are sort of a startup or a spin-off of an esports channel on Twitch. That means that they already have tremendous experience streaming. They already have a lot of equipment, a lot of cameras, a lot of know-how. They have a full production team, so that means that the on-air talent is not also piloting cameras. You might know what that's like, Peter.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, so this is a full production, and so full, in fact, that they will be streaming 5 tables simultaneously. Of course, the ATC is a 5-person team event. That means all 5 tables will have cameras on them. None other than Rob Bear and Kenny Boucher themselves will be the shoutcasters, which is what I'm told the kids call commentators on Twitch. And they're going to be doing the commentary. Actually, they're going to be mobile, so like they'll be walking around to various tables, getting updates. I'm told the goal is actually to have each table scoring on an iPad, so that way the score is real time updated onto the overlay. It's pretty wild, actually, what has been intimated to me. Why keep talking about them when they can tell us a little bit themselves? So here's one of the guys from Pro Tabletop, which you can follow on Twitch. Here we go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Brad here from Professional Tabletop. If you don't know who we are, what we're about, we've got over 10 years in esports production and broadcast experience, and we are basically bringing everything we know about esports into the tabletop world. To kind of get a big kickstart on that, we've got ATC coming up this weekend, and we're going to be doing all the production and streaming for the event. You can watch it at twitch.tv/pro tabletop. We're going to have the top 5 tables going, top-down cameras, some PTZ cameras, some like close-up camera shots up on the tables and everything like that. And of course, you can't forget the people who are going to be commentating and talking about the games. The 2 that you guys will probably know name-wise is going to be Rob Bear and Kenny B. So make sure to tune in all weekend long at ATC. Once again, twitch.tv/pro tabletop. We'll see you.
Sounds fantastic, and I really hope it goes well for them, because this is the first time, I guess, like I said, an established channel taking interest in 40K, trying to make it something that's watchable.
I'm really excited for this. This is kind of, if it works out, which, crossed fingers it does, this is a real big step for us. If you go back to, say, last year when Warhammer TV started doing their streams with their color commentary from Jeff and Frankie, that was huge. But like, it's always needed that next step, right? And this may be it. I mean, I love the idea of having guys that are wandering around to the tables with handy cams. Kenny B and Rob, they know the game, so it's not like we're getting 2 people that are outside of the world of 40K trying to explain what's happening at the tables. I'm really looking forward. I've got high hopes.
There's some great dedicated streaming groups out there. I mean, our friends at the Down Under Network, Honest Wargamer, which we'll be doing Capital City Bloodbath with, and those guys, I mean, they innovate a lot with what they have, and they do as much as they can to make an entertaining product, but they are constrained by resources. And like I said, these guys have hopefully all the gear they need to do something really special. So tune in on Twitch starting this weekend. Should be a blast. Very most recent Chapter Tactics episode, super awesome. Reese is on there, Jeff, Sean, Pablo. They go through the Knights, the Renegade Knights, or whatever it's called. Chaos Knights? What is it called now?
Yeah, Renegade Knights Codex. It's an excellent podcast. Really, like, a lot of really excellent insights into the builds that these guys expect to see come out. There's some pretty ridiculous stuff that they talk about. They also get really in depth on the strategies against knight lists, with a little bit more focus on renegades now, with what we're expected to see with these 24 stomp knights wandering around killing all your dudes. Really, really excellent episode. Announcement for a possible new Frontline Network podcast. If you catch the beginning of it with Jeff and Sean, we'll see if that pans out. Yeah, really great overall.
Oh, and then also, obviously, TGX in Toronto coming up on July 20th. I'm working really hard here, guys, trying to get ourselves up to a major status. We are sitting right around 60 players still. I'm working the phones day and night. Please check it out, tabletopgamingx.com. If you can get to the Greater Toronto area. If you're from the Greater Toronto area, come check us out. It's going to be a really, really great event. We got some super good players coming, basically the entire Canadian ETC team. So is the rest. What else we got?
Well, we got Capital City Bloodbath coming up in August. You and I and the Honest Wargamer and 100 other beautiful souls are going to be in the capital of Canada, Ottawa, Ontario. Beautiful city. to watch and or play some Warhammers, as well as a number of other different tabletop games. Should be a blast.
Absolutely. One of my favorite every year. And even though TGX is pretty sweet, I'd say Capital City Bloodbath is still the jewel of the Canadian tournament circuit. All right, so I think without further ado, it's about time to hit that bump.
Tournament news is made possible by bestcoastpairings.com. Download the BCP TO app to organize events for just about any tabletop game system. Download the player app to easily find and participate in events from around the world. Subscribe to BCP for as little as $5 a month to support the team and unlock additional features. Available for iOS and Android. BestCoastPairings.com. Competitive events easier.
For our first event this week, we fly to the Element Games Gaming Centre, home to a plethora of high-level events in the UK throughout the year. This time it would be an ETC-style event hosted by the stalwart Allies of Convenience podcast team. You can check them out on their long-running show, alliesofconvenience.podbean.com.
Most of Team Wales in England were in attendance, and even the dregs of Team Scotland. I believe at least one Innes Wilson was there. These Welshmen have been running competitive events for several years now, and let's kick it to the TO for his words on the event.
Absolutely.
So the Allies of Convenience GT has pretty much been running since late 2015 and has been run by the Allies of Convenience podcast guys, which is pretty much just the Team Wales podcast, right? So you have a bunch of people circulating through Team Wales, and we've been running this podcast, which has kind of been like a labor of love, really, and that spawned the Allies of Convenience GT. So as such, it hasn't really kind of stuck to a fixed date or a fixed location. So we had one in Warrington in the northwest of the UK. But we had another one down in Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales, down in the south of Wales, which is a decent chunk of time, probably like a 3-hour drive, which in UK standards is a decent drive. And then this one was held over in Stockport at Element Games in the UK, where we hold a lot of our big events. I did clash with a couple of other events this time. So there was another ITC big event held on the Isle of Man, and another one down in Bristol as well. So we had quite a few ETC players that are going to Serbia this year turn up at the Allies of Convenience GT. So we had a lot of people kind of just doing a lot of last-minute testing for the ETC itself, because it was the weekend before list submission. So people were using it as an opportunity to really practice some lists. I don't doubt that there were some teams that probably didn't take their ETC lists, but it's a good bit of practice. In the UK, the July section of the year is quite stacked with events, because there's just lots of events of people preparing for the ETC, and if they're not going to the ETC, kind of got a good amount of time off of that as well. But we did see quite a few interesting lists. It was quite a varied pack, but one of the things that really popped up was orcs. So at one point, I think we had 4 orc players on the top 5 tables during the event. Lots of smasher guns popping up, which is nice to see. We know my feelings on looters. If you want to keep up with future events like the Allies of Convenience podcast, or just UK events in general, what you can end up doing is you can go and follow the Allies of Convenience podcast on Facebook, which is facebook.com/AOC podcast. Or if you're a Welsh person who's interested in the ETC, you can go to /Team Wales 40k on Facebook, or at Team Wales 40k on Twitter, and have a look at that and just hit us up, and we'll be really interested to hear from you and see if you're interested in that kind of stuff. We're always looking for more Welsh people to really get involved with the scene. It's good to have a nice, vibrant community like we already do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is that technically a Welsh accent from Tom? Sounds English to me.
Yes.
Actually, Tom is one of the most notorious mercenaries out there. He played actually for Team Canada last year.
Oh.
Was my roommate, if I recall correctly. It was a bit of a blur.
So the event would eventually come down to 2 final undefeated players duking it out in a round 5 matchup, featuring Anthony the Red Baron Chew and Tom Likes It on Top Higginbottom.
Anthony has been running variations of flyer spam for some time now, going on at least 6 months, I believe, with extreme success, and we were lucky enough to get a hold of him after the event. But let's have a quick look at his list as it stands right now.
Sure thing. So Anthony Chu at the Allies of Convenience ran an Air Wing detachment, Ally Talk, with 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs and 2 Plain Jane Crimson Hunters. He then had a Cabal of the Blackheart Air Wing detachment with 2 Razor Wings and 2 Void Raven Bombers. So that's right, 9 Flyers, folks. He then had an Otark in an Ally Talk battalion with a Farseer Skyrunner, a Warlock Skyrunner, 20 Guardian Defenders with 2 heavy weapon platforms for them shuriken cannons, and 2 units of 5 Rangers.
Now, we saw a list very similar to this being run by a guy down south.
Yes, Chris Blackham has been running a very similar list. Anthony's been running this list for quite some time. I've seen the earliest I want to say, and my memory is a little shoddy, so it may not have even been him, but I just remember people getting super mad about it. It was back in January, just pre-LVO.
Right.
This 9 flyer list popped up over in the UK, and people were all about how nonsense it was.
Despite the best intentions, seems like it's still quite a bit of nonsense because Anthony Chu, of course, got to the top table of the event.
Yeah. Oh no. This isn't his first time. He's always a front runner at these things, and this kind of 6 to 9 flyer business has been his jam for some time.
All right. So why don't we listen to Anthony talk a little bit about this list and what performed really well for him over the weekend.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. So this list was something I put together as a ongoing thing about flyer spam. So this is a 9 flyer list, but I've been working to put in better support and psychic powers generally on the ground presence. So you've got your Vect from the Dark Eldar section. You've also got the Eldar flyers, and then I've got the Guardian bomb, which has been a real boost in my recent games. So that's really worked well. But the whole list is designed to be able to take a punch and go second, which I think is massive in the meta. So that's generally how I've put that list together and why I've been running that in recent tournaments, and it's been doing really well. The event was really great. We used the ETC mission pack, just in case you're wondering, but I don't think I would change the list for ITC. I think it's got good scoring. It can definitely stop opponents scoring kill more. It might struggle a bit with hold more, but you just kill people off and win that in the late game, and it's greater with the holding secondaries in ITC as well as scoring Maelstrom in ETC. Okay, so my MVP for this weekend, if I had to pick a unit, probably has to go and be that Guardian bomb. It's amazing the amount of damage that you can put out with it, and it's amazing how frustrating it can be for opponents to deal with, where they're trying to focus on planes and suddenly you throw in 20 Guardians with a Protect, or you make a hole in their lines where they hadn't expected to lose a massive unit. Because, gone are the days of Yunari firing twice, but having 40 shots will remove a big unit of boys between Guide and Doom, followed up by planes, or it can tail across multiple objectives and score you good points. It's a really great unit, really versatile, and having battle focus makes them really mobile with that firepower.
All right, so giving a little shout out to the Guardians in a list with 9 flyers.
Yeah, right.
Yes, those Guardians are tremendously nasty, even in light of the 9 flyers. And I guess where this goes a little bit different from the Blackman list is less of a reliance on characters, because, he does have the Guardians and the Rangers and stuff. It's not just flyers and characters. Yeah,
he's definitely relying, like he said, he's looking for something that's a little more stable on the ground, just so that he doesn't get that awkward, win condition get thrown upon his opponent, where he loses everything before it's too late.
Absolutely, and he did talk about, his ability to kill boys, interestingly enough, and perhaps that had, maybe boys were top of mind. Orc boys, that is.
For sure.
Were top of mind for him.
Yeah, Anthony's opponent in the final round, Tom, he brought the Orc boys to town. In fact, he went with a skew that you've been seeing more and more on the at least in the UK side. I have been seeing 7 or 8 show up in North American lists, but in this case, it's the Smash-A-Gun. It's become very, very popular of late.
All right, let's see if old Hef can handle this. I'm gonna take a run at it, Mr. Tom Higginbottom. With his Orcs list, he had a battalion detachment of Evil Sons with 2 war bosses, just with a custom with the Power Claw, and then he had 1, 2, 3 units of Orc boys. Almost, so the 1 of 30 was Slug and Choppa, 2 were Shuda with some points shaved by the looks of it. Yes, like 2, so they're about units of 29, I believe. And then we had a 2nd Battalion detachment, Orc Bad Moons, 2 Weird Boys, another 30 Orc Boys, and then a unit of 10 Orc Boys, also with Shudas, and then a unit of 10 Gretchen, and then finally we had an Orcs Death Skulls detachment. This is where obviously the Dreadwa is. Death Skull Shock Attack Gun, a Weird Boy, 30 Grots, and finally, as the Falcon had alluded to, we've got a total of 17 Smash-A-Guns. Am I reading that right?
You are reading correctly. 1 short of taking the max.
So for those at home, a Smash-A-Gun is 31 points for a Toughness 5, 6 wound model, and it has a 48-inch range, D3 shots on Grot ballistic skill. Big deal for the orcs because that's a 4+. And then it does this weird thing. It wounds stuff based on the target's toughness. So if it's toughness 7, you have to roll a 7 or higher to wound it, and then it's -4 d6 damage. Bit of a tricky thing to run in a terrain dense environment, and I wonder if maybe that's why you don't see it as much in North America. What do you think about that?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. Like I said, recently there's been a kind of a turn towards smasher guns and tractor cannons, but not in these numbers. You're seeing 4, 5, 6. At most, I've seen maybe 7 in a list. At least one that's been successful. I have definitely seen a couple people try to run, say, 12 smasher guns in a list, but they're normally down, near the bottoms of the ranks, just because it's a lot of points into models that. While they are 5 wounds and they are super cheap, they do die pretty fast. So they can get your opponent kill more pretty easily in the wrong matchups.
Tom doesn't go too in depth about his list, but he does have a little bit of a quote here for us. Why don't we kick it over to Tom?
So the Orc list is a gun line with good board control and combat. It's got excellent mobility with the jump and green tide. It's also, I think, got a lot of answers for the top current builds in the meta.
So, like I said, short and sweet, but there was Tom's wrap of that. Now, by all accounts, these guys had an incredibly close game and a brutal game with Tom's Orcs barely scraping together when to take the event. Before we kick it over to the guys to talk about their top table game, do you have any more comments about these lists?
No, I mean, this is kind of what I would say, like Anthony mentioned, the flyer spam list is something that it has definitely been successful in the ITC. It's a big boogeyman right now. It got a very high win rate. It's not winning a lot of tournaments, but it has won some. There's definitely some hard counters to it. And Tom's list, I mean, orcs are everywhere right now. Overall, their win percentages might not be super duper great, but they're getting brought down by very specific lists. Whereas, the top performers are week in and week out killing it.
It's been a great little summer renaissance for the boys. So let's hear it in some gory detail from Tom himself going through a few turns of the final game.
Game 5 was against Mr. Tony Chu, the godfather of planes, with his Eldar Doc Eldar Soup. There was 9 with bits of characters and 20 guardians and deep strike. I really wanted to go first here, but Tony won the roll off for first turn, so naturally I lost 10 smasher turn 1. My turn 1 I shot back with the sag. He vectored more Daka. I shot twice anyway. I think I got lucky and dragged maybe, I think it was at least one plane, maybe a plane and a half with the sag, and then some shooters into another one to drop another. Tony's turn 2, he got the rest of the smasher and started. I lost like 40 boys, I think, or 45. No, it was 40. It was the big squad that I'd mobbed up the previous turn. In my turn 2, I set on objectives, just tried to play the mission as best I could. And I think I took maybe another 2 planes out turn 2. So turn 3, all the smasher are gone, and Tony just starts focusing on boys, which is difficult for me because that's my scoring. We trade back and forth a little bit for the next couple of turns, but I'm getting a little lead on the mission at this point. I've had okay cards, but it's a progressive scoring ETC style mission as well, so I'm picking up a few extra points than Tony just every turn. So at the start of 5, I haven't got much left. I've got maybe a 10-man squad of boys, a 30 on the other side of the board, and a couple of characters dotted around, but unfortunately I timed out, so I just had to sit where I was. Tony got his turn 6 in and scored more cards, and just hunkered in for the sort of end game objectives, but fortunately for me I'd done enough throughout the game that it wasn't quite enough, and it was a 4-point win. So I was very happy with that. The MVP in that game was obviously the Big Mac. I wouldn't have been able to sort of bring out the win without that guy. I think if he didn't roll the 6s that he rolled for the hits and stuff, would have been really difficult trying to move around the board when you're being move blocked all the time, and I didn't have enough smites or shooters or anything like that to really drag the planes down otherwise. So yeah, he did really a lot of work in that game.
Yes, the hot rolling shock attack gun. It is the savior of some, the bane of many. Why don't we just hear a couple words from Tony you'll see that point resonated with him for sure.
Okay, so my highlights of the top table match. It was a great game. A lot of smasher guns, 17 smasher guns, and I think actually the smashers were okay, and I killed quite a lot of them first turn, going first. But the shock attack gun just ruined me, and that's a thing when you play shock attack guns with Eldar planes. It's the 5-up runs on the Dark Eldar is great, and you can vect the Mordaka for getting 5s and 6s to hit, which is essential. But even then, my opponent Tom was rolling so many 6s and high strength and high number of shots that he was getting 2 to 3 hits and removing, even on low damage, moving 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wounds from planes and just crippling me. And really that game got away from me because I was losing 1 to 2 planes a turn where normally I lose 1, maybe 2 maximum from the whole army. He was taking 1 to 2 down with that gun.
That's some hot dice, I'm not going to lie. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah. Actually, it brings to mind, I already mentioned their podcast once, but if you take a listen to Best in Faction's last episode, it's about 2.5 hours long, so settle in. But Chuck Arnett goes through his matches at his last event that he attended, Boise Cup, and he plays in almost a dead center, similar list here to Tom, with changes to the smasher guns. Other than that, very similar. And he has quite the opposite experience against Eldar Flyer Spam, where his shock attack gun does nothing in it, and you get to hear the brutal after effect when it doesn't swing your way.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Congrats to everyone at the Allies of Convenience GT. Why don't we hit a little bump?
Tournament news.
Hey guys, this is Nick Nanavati from Knights of the Game Table Pro, where I teach you how to become a better 40K player. And you're listening to 40K Stat Center.
A smooth read by Mr. Nanavati, kind enough to give us a little bit of a plug for the show. It was hot in Cleveland at the Triple C tournament in the center of everything Ohio. 47 players dueled for their chance to be an Ohio 10, which I'm told is like a California 6. No one will tell us what the ratings are based on, but our friend Pablo has claimed he is at least an 8.
This was an ITC event with a few modifications. Players were allowed to bring unpainted models. However, their opponents would receive +2 to stealing the initiative if this was the case. They also implemented a reverse steal, quote unquote. If a player was given first turn by their opponent, they could choose to roll, and on a 6, they gave it back. And lastly, they did have a set of tertiary objectives for players from the tournament itself. I believe these were actually for secondary prizes more than actually points scored towards their actual game results, but it was something that they did add, and it kind of added a little extra flair to that standard ITC fare. Gilberto Rivera, TO, podcaster, and Ohio 12, gave us the scoop.
Hello, my name is Gilberto Rivera, better known as TCDG, and I am part of the Chainsword Diaries. This is our second year doing the Cleveland Chainsword Championships. This is our first GT, and our goal was to create a one-of-a-kind experience. The meta was everything that we expected to see. TJ brought his demons. There were several demon players, and then there were some counters to them. A lot of Astra Militarum. So basically, if you have an army that shoots really well, they were playing it there. I was actually surprised to see very little Knights on the table this weekend. So the Chainsword Diaries, we wanted to do something different with our GT. So we not only partnered up with Dave & Buster's, but for our grand prize, we got to partner up with one of our sponsors and one of our friends, Gravity Dice, and the top prize were 6 14-karat gold dice. Very wonderful prize. And the winner of the Cleveland City, Cleveland Chainsword Champion, he also got a entry paid to the CTC, the Canadian Tabletop Championships. And those 2 prizes alone are well worth over, a good chunk of change. Something we called the gold standard.
The gold standard. How would you like to see that become a common tournament prize? I think gold dice is pretty ballin'.
That's freaking incredible. When I saw that, I was blown away. It almost made up for the fact that they referred to themselves as the premier North Coast event for Warhammer 40K. as if they are any closer to the northern coast of our continent than I am.
I mean, Cleveland's on the south shore of Lake Erie. So I guess the northern coast of America?
I guess so. I guess that's our. I guess Lake Erie is the 8th ocean of the world.
Yeah, it's big. It's big. I'm
I
pretty
guess.
shallow, though. Took out the Edmund Fitzgerald in rough seas. As we all know.
Man, Salty John's going to love that one.
Oh, it goes deep, but not that deep. Probably about 400 or 500 feet. Okay, so let's move on here. This tournament would come down to DJ Timms running AdMech and Team Canada's Citizen in Training, TJ Lanikin running an insane variation on his dominant list. Now, we'll get to TJ in a moment, but first, why don't we have a quick look at what DJ brought along. He was rocking a battalion at AdMech with the Greya Forge World, and he took the Servitor Maniple in this battalion. He had a Tech Priest Dominus and a Tech Priest Engine Seer. As troops, he had 10 Cataphrone Destroyers with the Cognis Flamer Plasma Culverin, 2 with Phosphor Blaster and Plasma Culverin, and then he had in that same battalion 2 units of Skitarii Rangers, just naked. And then another battalion detachment, AdMech again, with Greya, this one running a Cybernetica cohort, so we got some Stompy Robots coming at us. Under the HQ, we had a Tech Priest Engine Seer and a Tech Priest Manipulus. And then under troops, we had 3 men units of Skitarii Rangers. And then under heavy support, we had the big Stompy Robots. We had 5 Castellan Robots with the 2 heavy Phosphor Blasters. And then finally, there was a Vanguard detachment. This one, switching it up, Styges, Tech Priest Engine Seer. We had 3 units of 4 Servitors, and then a fast attack of 6 Sidonian Dragoons with the Taser Lance for an exactly 2,000 points. That's the whole thing.
That is, in fact, the whole thing.
I love lists that are the good things, you know?
Yeah, it's really enjoyable, especially Castellan Robots. They were everywhere when the Cult Mechanicus book first came out, and then they kind of disappeared because everybody realized all you had to do was touch them, and they stopped working.
Right.
But the new Vigilus detachment breathed a little bit of life into them, so you're starting to see them more and more, even sometimes Fistolins. But yeah, no, it's a pretty exciting list. What did DJ have to say about it?
So I started AdMech about a year ago as kind of a side project while I was waiting for Grey Knights to get anything to not have to spend 60% or more points into an ally and still not have something competitive. And the more and more I played the AdMech, the more I liked them. And this is the first time that I ran a pure AdMech force that I wasn't just taking detachments, wasn't just taking allies and pieces and parts of it. And it was my buddy Graham who came up with this combo that he stumbled upon, and I just took it miles away and practiced it and played with so many people, got so many opinions, and it was really a strong showing of what a good gaming group can do when there's a lot of minds on a single project. So something special about my army is the way, that concept of how it even came about. It was just a regular conversation talking 40K with one of my buddies, Graham, and he stumbled upon a combo while we were looking over the new detachments that AdMech had gotten and said, oh, look, there's this ability, and then it transpired into another ability, and everything just started stacking in such a way that it was like, are we crazy for looking at this? Am I crazy for thinking that I can spend 600 or 400 whatever points in 5 Castellan Robots? Can this work? And so I started asking a couple people. I'm like, hey, so I'm thinking about running Castellan Robots. And of course, a lot of people were like, no, you can't do it. You can't do it without call. You got to do it this way. And then I started explaining everything to them, and they're all like, that sounds crazy enough to actually work. So my army's basically 3 units: Castellan Robots, Destroyers, and Dragoons. And going into this, if you asked me who I thought my MVP was going to be, I would have had to pick the Destroyers. Any of the games that I played practicing with my buddies, when we were talking about our lists afterwards, they were always a star. They impressed me, they impressed my friends. They were just the definition of impressive. It was the Dragoons. The Dragoons carried me through all of day one. The Dragoons just made sure that they were the measuring stick for the rest of my army, and they gave me the ability to know, looking at the table, if I needed to progress, if I needed to stay back based on how far they were, how many were left alive. They were such a good visual measuring stick on the field.
There's a lot I really like about DJ's comments there. One, team effort. I love that he credited his squad. I wish he actually name drop a few of them. But I mean, Reese is always talking about like go follow your heart. You two can play catechins and never lose a game, or whatever it is that Reese does. So I think it's really cool that he felt like he was stumbling on some stuff that maybe was undervalued or whatever, and had a good performance in a GT.
No, it's great. It's also just another callback to this concept of play the crap out of what you want to get good at. So many times, whenever I talk to friends from back home or just players in general, they'll constantly ask me, what are the stats on this unit? What does this do? What would make this better than this? And like, what should I put in my list? And a lot of times I have to say, like, it's not just based on the numbers, guys. Like, get the reps in. You can play almost any army or unit in this game and get good, and put in results just by getting those reps in.
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to spoil things too bad, but the top table maybe didn't go so well for DJ versus TJ. So he decided to share some highlights from one of his other favorite games from the weekend. Let's let him tell us about that before getting to TJ himself.
My biggest highlight from this weekend would have had to been my second game against Wesley. That game opened up great for me. By the end of the second turn, I got 2 out of the 3 long-range threats eliminated from his army. Dragoons are in his deployment zone. He's got a real small force, and they're in the corner on one objective in his deployment zone. Mad respect for that guy. He never checked out. He was in that game all the way to the end, and he pushed back, got the Dragoons out of there, started scoring the points that he could score and trying to deny me from the ones that I could. And I got to a point where the best I could do was just take a knee. Just score the points I needed to score, make sure that I didn't give up too many points, and it ended up being a 23-22 finish. I still had a lot of threats on the table that I could have pushed at him. I can't say that he wouldn't have eliminated them and then may have squeaked out a win by castling up and staying in the game till the end.
So just for reference, he's referring to Wesley Tinch, who played a very unique Carcharodon list, my absolute favorite Space Marine chapter. So
what a hero!
So I'm super excited to see someone get the kind words for playing such a wicked army, at least in the lore. We won't go into the list in general because it wasn't a top table list. But if you want to check it out, head on over to BCP. It's a very unique, interesting list, and I really like the look of it.
When we have reoccurring characters on the show, I tend to ask them, maybe what they've changed or shifted around. This is some breaking news, I think, for Stat Center. TJ Lanigan made some changes to his list.
So I ran the same list that I've been running for a while. I added one little change. I basically just took out one pink and added in the banner for them. Sorry, the instrument for them, so that they could get an extra +1 on their charge and advance rolls. Just makes the charge a little easier. 8-inch charge, much easier to kind of deal with than a normal 9-inch charge. So that was that. So still running, the 2 full units of Plague Bearers, and then I'm running some Terminators. I ran 8 of those guys, who did fantastic for me, and then I ran 2 of the Flamer guys. Death Guard Demon Prince, it's the same Nurgle detachment with the Heralds and everything like that. Bile Piper, the 2 Demon Princes for Thousand Suns, and then Armin. So standard list.
All right, not the biggest, most amazing change to TJ's list, but let's hear what his MVP was this week. I'm sure it was really different.
MVP of the weekend continues to be the same units. Foul Blight Spawns just really put in the work this weekend. My Flamer brothers, they just really saved me. Game 4 in particular, they were just on fire. So game 4, I played against Dom, great opponent. He's running Eldar Flyers, and my list doesn't have a lot of interaction with Flyers other than like targeted smites and those guys. So those guys single-handedly took out like 4 Flyers on their own. So it made it very, very frustrating for my opponent to get anywhere basically near my lines, which really helped me kind of keep him off his secondaries that he had picked, because he had picked like recon and things like that. So I mean, it was very, they were very clutch in most of my games. So I really, really enjoy those guys.
Outside of that, like we mentioned already, TJ did come out and win the event in sparkling fashion. He did defeat DJ 36-18 in his final matchup. So rather than talk too much about how that game broke down, we asked TJ what his favorite game of the tournament was.
So highlights from some of my games. I think Game 4 was definitely my best game, or my toughest game for me. We were playing against Dom, great opponent. He had tons of flyers, so that was already kind of tough. I do interact with it because I do have the flamer guys and things like that, but it's not my best matchup. It's not a bad matchup, but it's not a good one either. And then my dice immediately decided that they were going to not come to play, which is kind of funny. Just a series of like unfortunate events happen on the tabletop, rolling psychic powers, it just fails. Like my first spell, I perils, dealt myself 3 wounds, like just some really, really funny stuff. But Flamer guys basically clutched that entire game by themselves. They literally killed 4 flyers by themselves. So basically they did most of the work. They were probably the only consistent thing the whole game. So some pretty funny interactions, like Demon Prince trying to charge flyers and doing nothing.
So there you have it. There were some of the more exciting games. Now, as mentioned, DJ and TJ, did meet on that top table. DJ neglected to share many stories, so why don't we go over to TJ and we'll find out exactly why.
So turning point at the top table. Unfortunately, it was really just one of those missions that is heavily favored for someone who has middle table presence and board control for the middle of the table. So we played Crucible Champions. So the bonus is if you you have a character on all 3 objectives. You don't even have to hold them. You just have to have a character on 3 objectives. So that's a really, really good mission for me because I run like 9 characters. So that was kind of like when we got to the table and we figured out we were playing that was kind of rough. And then once we picked deployment and I picked Search and Destroy for the deployment because that's in the tournament you get to roll for it. Once we picked that was pretty much, I would say, the turning point. Because once I played Search and Destroy, there's some Nova L's in the middle or some building L's in the middle, kind of block line of sight. I kind of just sat there and grabbed, 4 to 5 points a turn without any kind of repercussion.
So TJ, as we said, would end up again victorious, going 6-0 and keeping his absolutely mad streak alive in that 36-18 showing. Who can stop this juggernaut? I'm not sure we'll ever find out.
Tournament news.
I'm Lawrence Baker.
And this is the B-Bone from Tabletop Tactics.
You're listening to 40k Stat Center.
Why not actually go a little bit, off the British accent beaten path, and let's have and learn some fun facts about the Isle of Man. It is the birthplace of the Bee Gees. Suck it, Australia.
It is not part of the United Kingdom, but it is ruled directly by the Queen as the Lord, not the Lady, of Man.
The Queen is the Lord of Man. They have weird cats with no tails.
It's the motorcycle capital of the world.
People care so little about the Isle of Man that the number one fact about it in travel guides is that it even exists. But you know what? We care. And so did the 36 players that hopped on their dinghies to take part in Warzone Man 2019. We caught up with the event runner Simon Chatterley for some more info.
So I started Warzone Man in 2016 after going to events in the UK and deciding it was something I'd love to do for my local club on the Isle of Man. We have a decent player base, but we didn't really have any events like what I'd been going to in the UK, and I just really felt we were missing out. So that's how Warzone Man was born. Next question on the meta. The meta in the Isle of Man was what I would call sort of a club standard. So you had some good players with some good lists, and a lot of players who just really wanted a weekend rolling dice and playing toy soldiers. So that was kind of where we came from. Since becoming an ITC GT last year, the meta really sort of stepped up a bit. We're seeing players from the UK coming over now and bringing some sort of, some serious lists.
So Simon Chatterley, in case of those of you guys don't remember, he's a bit of an insane person. He's good friends with Ace Face and can usually be seen holding Ace's hair at the LVO after he is overindulged. Regardless of all those facts, ran 3 brass scorpions at the same time in Southport, the Last Chance Open. That's just my favorite thing about him. At the GT where that guy got busted cheating in the background of a Twitch stream. Amazing.
Oh, yeah. I remember now.
Oh,
what a scandal.
I mean, just amazing. So this was a full-on ITC event that did feature some bigger names from that side of the ocean, including the eventual top table players, Conrad the Crimson King Barkowitz, and Mark Carlsberg is a balanced breakfast crumble home.
Both players have had decent success of late, with Mark mixing and matching brands of multi-faction Eldari, and Conrad taking a number of high-placing finishes with Caladius Grav tanks before handing them off to family members in the last month in favor of Craft World Eldar. In fact, it was only 2 months ago that Conrad and Mark played each other on stream at St. George's Champions in what was a pretty thorough stomping on Conrad's part, mushing Mark's Eldar into paste under sheer weight of fire. That being said, like I mentioned, he has switched to Craft World Eldar. So let's talk a little bit about Conrad. He brought a Ally Talk a Air Wing detachment with 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs and a Hemlock Wraithfighter. He then had an Ulthway battalion with a Farseer Skyrunner, a Warlock Skyrunner, 2 squads of 6 Dire Avengers, and a squad of 20 Guardians, the Guardian Bomb, as well as 2 Wave Serpents. And then he topped it off with a same-hand patrol detachment with an Otark Skyrunner, a Farseer, 8 Storm Guardians, and 9 Wind Riders with scatter lasers.
Absolutely love it. I mean, that is a very toolsy list. Like the last Eldar list we saw is incredibly skewed, but this has a number of different kinds of units, including some familiar ones, obviously running Eldar Flyers, but not all in on it.
It definitely brings a lot of, like you said, it's a toolbox. It brings a lot of different pain from a lot of different angles. Those scat bikes can do work. We saw it at LVO. We've seen it many times since. I'm surprised we don't see it more, to be fair. The Skyrunners, always excellent pieces. The Guardian Bomb. It's just, it's a really good all-around Craft World list.
Absolutely. So why don't we actually just kick it over to Conrad, and he can walk us through some of his favorite parts about the list.
I guess the main thing different with my list is I have taken different craft worlds to gain the maximum value out of each trait. So obviously Ally Talk on the Flyers, Simhan for the scatter bikes that move or deep strike and shoot with no penalty, and for the Autark with the Super Lance, the Nova Lance, which is really good, and Ulthway on the rest because Feel No Pain for free is good on Serpents, and Guardians hitting on 2s on the deep strike with Guide, Doom, Jinx is super valuable to have as well against not only hordes but also tougher big targets like Knights. Or I can definitely narrow down the MVPs to 2 units. The bikes are amazing against both hordes and bigger targets with Doom, Guide and Jinx, and then Fire and Fading every turn back to safety. They're always underestimated, rarely a priority target actually against a lot of opponents, or they're safe behind a ruin out of line of sight, and they added a crazy amount of damage output to the list. And then the Autark, he has a solution to Tau with the Ignore Overwatch. He's Simhan, so you can use this strat to move 22, shoot and charge without penalty, which is really strong. And with a fusion gun, the Super Lance, all his shots and charging, he actually has a massive damage output for the only 120 points ish that he costs. He actually finished off an Orion dropship.
Finished off an Orion dropship by himself. That's a gangster move.
That's my butt clenched hearing that. You know what? I really enjoy the list reads or the like MVPs that from some of these guys, because they really give so much insight into how their lists work.
Shifting gears over to the other pointy-eared top tabler, Mr. Mark Crumbleome. He made a number of changes to his list since St. George's as well, though unlike Conrad, he at least stayed loyal to his faction. Falcon, follow me as we visit with some dark kin here. So we have a Prophets of Flesh battalion with Urian, Rakarth, a Homunculus, 3 units of 5 Rasks, 3 units of 7 grotesques with monstrous cleavers and 7 flesh gauntlets. And then we have a Cabal of the Blackheart spearhead with an Archon, 3 Ravagers, and then finally, a nice little touch here, a Soaring Spite Vanguard of Harlequins with a Troopmaster and 3 Death Jesters, as well as 6 Skyweaver jet bikes with those lovely Haywire cannons. Love those Death Jesters with the snipey.
Oh yeah, I think it's a big part of so many lists now. They're very accurate. They can pick out characters. I'm surprised he went with Soaring Spite, although in the end the Skyweavers are a definite good choice, and that's really why you would go Soaring Spite. But so many people have swung over to Dreaming Shadow for those Death Jesters just for the relic gun. What does Mark have to say though?
I went back to Grotesques over Talos for this list. I just found it was a little bit more survivable versus Knights, which is an awful lot of knocking about, and also potentially Caladius Grav tanks, which have been around a lot in recent events. I wanted to try the Skyweaver jet bikes, obviously without a Farseer and Doom now since the FAQ. And I went back to Ravagers with an Archon as a safety net. I really wanted Vect in the list, because I've missed it in a couple of recent events. I've really missed having Vect.
MVP for sure was the Haywire bikes. Absolutely fantastic, especially when I did come up against the Caladius Grav tanks. They were able to obviously shoot the hell out of everything, but also locking up some Lehman Russ Punishers that were knocking around, and just overall being a menace versus vehicles. But with the Zephyr Glaives as well, they did a job versus almost any unit they went into. So absolutely MVP.
Going out hard for those Skyweaver jet bikes.
There was a reason why people used to take like 18 of them for the longest time, and it wasn't just Imperial Knights. They're a really quality part of a lot of Eldar lists. So on paper, this was a brutally close match coming down to a 1-point differential, with Mark barely squeaking out the win. You can actually catch the game on Facebook Live if you check out Twisted Dice TV. They provided a lot of the pre-event coverage for the tournament on Twitch. The stream was a little bit last minute. We did harp on them to see if somebody would provide us with some coverage. So it's just a camera on the table, and you get to see the players rolling dice while pointing at different models. A little bit boring for some, but I mean, if you use your imagination, it is incredible. And I will take any Warhammer coverage over none at all. I mean, the entire time I just imagined all those weird British things that the two guys were saying to each other.
So with some more weird British things that two guys said to us, here's Mark and Conrad talking about their final game.
The top table match was a really good game, a close game. A few things went my opponent's way. Turning points, there were a few really small things that added up to big margins in the score. So turn 1, the Autarch failed to kill a Ravager narrowly. He rolled all 1s and 2s to wound, which meant I didn't get kill or kill more, so that's a 2-point swing. And then a Wave Serpent later on failed to finish off a Harlequin bike, which was only on 2 wounds, I think, with both the Serpent Shield and shooting. So that meant I didn't steal an objective back, I didn't get hold, I didn't get kill or kill more. So a few things like that added up to a big discrepancy in the scores. And then in the last turn, failing to kill 3 Grotesques with 3 Flyers, 2 Farses, and 2 Serpents. So basically the rest of my army meant I didn't get kill or kill more and lost by 1 point.
Top table game against Conrad, a great player, always there or thereabouts in any event that he's at in the UK. Recently, he's the one that's been using the Caladius Grav tanks, which he beat me with at Glasshammer a few months ago. I played his brother round 4 with the Caladius, managed to win that, then played Conrad game 5. Major turning point was one of my Ravagers surviving almost his whole army. And it survived enough to kill 5 out of the 9 scatterbikes, and then the other one ran off to morale. So that unit was pretty much crippled after that, and that definitely swung the game for me. Other than that, the Death Jesters really performed. Just for harassment, holding objectives, you have to kill them, and sniping out small units of elves seems to be their speciality.
So there you have it. Wide agreement that things swung on everything shooting a Ravager, and then that one Ravager somehow killing the hell out of his army there. That sounded like it very much overperformed in returning fire.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a spectacular game. Like I said, you can watch it and make up your own commentary for how the game's progressing. It's an enjoyable game.
Watch your head, Peter. Here comes a bump.
Tournament news.
Hey, Big Nasty B and RoboEd from Life After Cover Save Comedy Games podcast, and you're listening to 40K Stat Center. It's kind of cool, I guess.
Mr. Blake giving us an "it's kind of cool, I guess" seal of approval. I'm just impressed that he even listened to 1 minute of our show at all. So, not only known for its primary export of thick card stock, perfect for elementary school presentations and science fair projects, but also as one of the UK's top tourist destinations.
In the southwestern corner of the greatest of Britons, Bristol now finds itself home to a new attraction, the Bristol City Open. Not to be confused with the big Bristol City GT that was held earlier this year. I mean, the people of Bristol are simple folk, and they would not wish to use any kind of inventiveness with naming conventions. It could confuse prospective players. How would they know where it was being held?
However, come they did, to a bona fide sports stadium rivaling even the finest Dave and Buster's that Cleveland had to offer. Here's the proud TO and convention organizer talking about the event.
In the UK, a lot of the events are kind of geared around some of the kind of larger population bases, typically London, which has a huge number of fantastic events, the Midlands, so kind of Birmingham, Nottingham, obviously where Warhammer World is, and also kind of into the north around the kind of Manchester scene. There isn't really a kind of a big event in the southwest, so we wanted to kind of create something that the kind of more, not necessarily hardcore gamers, but those who kind of want to attend an ITC level event but don't necessarily have the access to travel kind of too far away can attend. We've had about 44 players that kind of registered. We had 40 turn up for the weekend, which we were really chuffed with. Things that we kind of wanted to achieve were a really good kind of atmosphere, a good vibe, something to introduce people to the ITC format, played on kind of some really beautiful tables, for which we needed to thank some people. So the Bristol Vanguard Wargaming Group, who supplied a lot of the terrain, and if you see any pictures of the events, the boards are absolutely beautiful. Bristol Independent Gaming, who helped organise the event alongside a group called Blackheart Wargaming Events. We felt they put on a really, really good show, especially considering that it was the first year. There are lots of things for us to kind of take into consideration, also a lot of things for us to learn. Really, we just want to kind of say a big thank you to everybody that kind of turned up and competed. We were really, really happy that everyone kind of came away from the event feeling like they took something away from it. I think some people are already kind of excited about next year. Some good feedback of kind of stuff areas where we want to improve and kind of develop going forwards. But realistically, if people kind of want to check us out on Facebook, if you search for Roll Dice Gaming, we're at Roll Dice Gaming on Instagram and on Twitter. And that's a good place for us to sort of share our thoughts of the event as we kind of look to build towards 2020. We'll hopefully have some confirmed dates really shortly, and also kind of an updated players pack for next year too. We had a real kind of spread of armies across the event. There was nothing that was necessarily going to be kind of obviously running away with it. We had some guys who were quite kind of new to the ITC format, some people who were clearly a bit more kind of experienced, but overall the vibe was really friendly, kind of lots of kind of sharing of kind of lists and kind of ideas and quite a lot of banter. We had some people who I think turned up with the expectation they're probably going to get tabled 5 times and actually did really well. And a real kind of focus on hobby as well, especially with the guys from Cult of Paint on hand to not only judge the painting competition but also kind of lend their critique towards some of the armies on display.
Yeah, so while it was a 1750 event, and it did run stock ITC missions, and as described, it gave the burgeoning local scene a chance to, give this competitive format a try. By all accounts, it sounded as though they did a really great job getting this off the ground, and we hope they hit their goals for growth next year. These guys really put on quite the performance. Like he said, if you want to check out pictures, you can always search the Bristol City Open on Facebook. They've got some beautiful terrain and tables. It looked like quite the event. When the games came down to it, though, after 5 rounds, there were 2 undefeated players. First, the winner, whose list is not uploaded to BCP, and you have to understand. Apparently, this fellow Josh showed up late to the event, so they didn't have time to get it uploaded. But we were lucky enough to have it sent to us, and I've got it right here. It is a 4-armed Emperor Genestealer Cult Battalion with an Icon Ward, a Primus, 2 units of 15 Acolyte Hybrids, and then a unit of 20 Acolyte Hybrids, a Clamovis, a Kellermorph, and then a second 4-armed Emperor Battalion with a Magus, a Patriarch, 3 units of 10 Brood Brothers, and a squad of 10 Aberrants with 2 improvised weapons. And then a third 4-armed Emperor Battalion with another Magus, another Patriarch, and 30 more Brood Brothers. So a very interesting list. I don't see any Rock Saws in those Acolyte Hybrid units. As far as I can tell, he went bare bones on everything and was just relying on those Aberrants to do all the real heavy lifting.
Yeah, fair enough. And there were 2 undefeated lists that you had mentioned. Unfortunately, we did not get an interview with Josh, so he swept in, played in the tournament. I think he's from the States. I don't know if I had the wrong Josh Conant. Weren't able to get an interview from him. If you know him, tell him he missed his chance at the big time. He'll have to win another one at a later time.
At the other final table, though, rampaging to an undefeated top finish for what some would say are the out-of-fashion Imperial Knights, I would disagree, was Jay Middlecoat. What's surprising here is he ran pure Imperial Knights, whereas many of the more popular Knights have at least some kind of added detachment. 1,750 points, though, so you've got this Housecrast detachment with 3 Knight Crusaders, and then he tags on 2 Armiger Helverins. The end. Keep it simple, stupid.
That is an absolutely brilliant list. I'm happy to hear you had some success with it. Why don't we kick it over to him and hear some specifics about how he arrived at it.
So this list is a Housecrast Crusader heavy list because the firepower is outstanding and you're also very, very good in close combat. In terms of things that I had to pick for this event, the relic always had to be set in your list. So as a result, my Warlord always had the 2+ armor save relic because I feel that's the most well-rounded of all of them. I also made both Helverins 1 unit of 2, so I only had 4 drops, which meant against other Knight armies I had a realistic chance of going first or getting that +1 as well. So my MVP for the entire weekend was almost always the Knight that I gave Iron Bulwark to, and not for the reasons you'd expect. Yes, it means he's got a 4-point vulnerable save that I don't have to spend a command point on. And the reason why he was the MVP was because he'd almost always be focused down last. I'd make my other Knights much more dangerous, so they'd either have the Housecrast Relic and Stratagem, so reroll 1s to hit and extra damage against vehicles, or it would be my Warlord with the 2-up armor save and things like that, and I'd put him in harm's way first, which meant that by the time I'd run out of command points, I then no longer had to worry about rotate on my last remaining Knight. And because people weren't focusing him down first, it meant I had massive last ability for that entire game. It was extremely important in the game against the Dark Eldar. It allowed me to win basically by not having to send those CP late in the game.
Yeah, I think he's an inspiration for anyone who wants to try and make monofaction Knights work. Why don't we listen to a few more tips and ideas he has about running Knights these days.
So another key point for me for the tournament was when I played in Game 4, I was playing against a fantastic opponent, Josh, who was playing Genestealer Cults, who eventually went on to win the event. One of the things that you need to remember as a Knight player especially is to maximise your potential for damage in every single turn of the game, no matter whose turn it is. So if you see a way you can try and do things like heroic intervention and stuff like that, it's extremely important that you do so and not forget these things. I managed to bait my opponent out to hold an objective, and it allowed me to then not only intervene into his unit and kill most of the unit, but also then to go past the unit he put out the screen, which ultimately is what left me getting back in the game and the game being a draw and not a loss.
Yeah, when you have only 5 models, you're definitely going to want to squeeze every last drop out of what you got.
Oh, for sure. I was going to say, if you listen to Chapter Tactics, this week's Chapter Tactics, it's actually something that Pablo himself brings up, talking about a game he had against Brandon Grant, where Brandon schooled him on the art of Imperial Knights and how key it is to use them in as many phases of the game as you can, because you're putting so many points into them.
Yeah, absolutely. And turns out the Chaos Knights, they can work in a lot of phases. You got to tune into Chapter Tactics for that. So let's round out this episode.
So I had two matches on the top table. The first game was against Dark Eldar. I touched on that with saying how the fourth invulnerable save was really, really good. The key point in the match for me was I'd managed to whittle down my opponent's scoring units to a pretty massive degree. All he had left essentially was planes, which meant that with one knight, as long as I had the correct target priority, I could get both kill and kill more, hold and hold more. And whilst I couldn't score much in the secondaries anymore, I was certainly winning on primary. And by scoring 8 points in 2 turns on the primary, that's what swung the game for me and allowed me to get a victory against the Dark Eldar.
There you have it. The now legendary Jay Middlecoat telling us all about his favorite game. Any final points you want to add?
So, Val, did you catch Chapter Tactics last week?
Oh, yeah, the one before last? Yeah.
Yeah, not the one that was like yesterday, because that one, wow. A1 Stellar Imperial, Renegade Knight stuff. But other than that, did you hear the talk about Rich and Brandon, how they slow played each other out of a tournament?
Hold on to your butt. You just triggered a hot and heavy Hefele torial.
Editorializing is not what the show is about. It's supposed to be for news. I'm sorry, Keith went the extra mile on how ridiculous that little bumper was. But this is a Hefele torial in which I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's really grinding my gears. And actually, this came up on Chapter Tactics, some other shows as well, just the concept of slow play. And I really wanted to speak to this because I feel like people are having an old standard applied to them these days, which in the right circumstances doesn't really apply anymore. And that would be slow play in an ITC event, playing ITC missions when you're on a clock. So slow play, what does that even mean? Well, it's deriving an advantage from basically unequitably allocating more time to yourself than your opponent. There's been famous examples of this in 40K. So you can give yourself an advantage in the mission itself, or you can give yourself an advantage over the field, especially in things that are heavily weighted towards end-of-game missions. We see this in Eternal War tournaments, at GT Heats, at Warhammer World from time to time. Big, slow armies, Plague Bearers, Orcs, whatever they might be, can just sit on objectives and win the game, even though their opponent didn't really get to play. So that gives them an advantage against the field, gives them an advantage in the game. In ITC, when you're playing on a clock, you got 2 things going for you. One, you've equitably distributed the time. In the case of Brandon Grant v. Rich Kilton, both players did in fact clock out, and they clocked out at turn 3, but neither of them used an unequitable amount of time. They both were fairly allocated their share of the clock. So there was no advantage given to slow play there. And second of all, because they only got to round 3, the total amount of points that were scored in that game was 20. I think Rich won 20-19. And that actually gave Rich very, very slim margin of victory over Thomas Hegstrom-Oki, beating him only by 2 points. There's been other examples of tables behind the top table catching up and passing because, the top table either didn't finish the game or didn't score as many points. But that's built in like that. So if you're not using your time really effectively, getting to that last turn, you yourself are counting yourself out or giving yourself a penalty just by not scoring as many points. So I would say that the ITC system is set up really, really well to deal with slow play. And in fact, worked perfectly in the case of the Boise Cup. I don't think there was anything wrong with the fact that those guys went 3 rounds. Rich almost won that last game, and he almost lost that tournament. That didn't happen, obviously. It came out on top because of the good job he had done in the other rounds, maximizing his points. So that's my Hefele torial. ITC clock matches, no such thing as slow play. Thank you very much. Peter, how was that?
You did good. I'm proud of you. I know that it's a hill that you will die on, much like me in 1,750-point tournaments. but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Which you've pointed out to me is a hill that I keep making you die on, and
yes,
I know that you
yes.
actually have no personal vendetta against 1750.
Exactly. I could care less, whatever, as long as that's what everybody's playing, or at least, a good amount of people will cover it.
I have run out of gas. How about you, Pete?
I'm getting there, bud. It's getting late. Getting late in the game.
It's super late. My eyes have crusted over, and I think it's about time we wrap this sucker up. Any final points you want to add?
No final points, but we should label out a quick announcement for next week's episode. So the Falcon here is flying east on a bit of a vacation.
Yeah.
So I may or may not have internet availability where I'm going. If I do, I will be bringing a mic and some things so that we can record whenever I can. If not, though, we do have a special guest host that's probably going to come on, boots on the ground at ATC. Ooh. So it should be very interesting. Get some key interviews with some big players. I'm pretty excited about it.
This has been part of the plan all along. Falcon did write into Stat Center HR and apply for the time off. We're happy that it's worked out for you and your family that you get to go visit.
It's going to be a good time. I'm gone for 2 weeks, but I've made plans to at least be able to attend one of our recording sessions. We're just going to figure out which, probably next week, though, with, like I said, our special guest host, who will remain a surprise for now, being on the ground at ATC. It just feels like a perfect week to do that.
My favorite thing about our special guest host is a lot of people know him, but they don't know they know him.
It's true. It's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I also want to send a special thank you to all the TOs and players that accepted my friend requests and Facebook Messenger requests. Special thank you to Peter for writing the episode as he does frantically every week. It has been a blast. And with all that said, Peter, do you have anything to add?
Bye-bye.
This has been 40K Stat Center, a presentation of the Frontline Gaming Podcast Network. Like what we do? Subscribe to and rate us on YouTube and wherever podcasts can be found. Join the conversation. Follow 40K Stat Center on Facebook. You can also support the show directly by joining the Chapter Tactics Patreon and competitive 40K in general via the ITC Patreon or by grabbing a subscription to BCP.
I just found a half-eaten bag of Cheetos in my garbage and it turned my whole life around.